All hands on deck!
Stone by stone, Stormwind shall fall.
What's up, Wild Hearthstone YouTube? Keith here again. We're going to wrap up our Deadmines card review today with the 1 epic and 4 legendaries that were revealed. This is going to be the same tier list format as the other videos. We're organizing them into tiers, and here are the definitions. S tier cards are an insane power level, generally considered broken, and are the most likely candidates to get nerfed. Demon Seed's the most obvious example of this, but all of the playable United and Stormwind questlines fit into this category. A tier cards are either strong staples in the respective classes, or are the center pins of their own archetypes. Good example of this is Dark Bishop Benedictus. B tier cards are playables for their respective archetypes or for their classes, but are not necessarily staples. In this case, there weren't any legendaries that I would have considered B tier for United and Stormwind. Either they were really good or really bad. Groat is the best example of a B tier epic and wild. I know it's insane for standard. We're just talking about wild. C tier cards aren't necessarily unplayable, but they're definitely considered fringe. A great example of this is Cornelius Rome. And finally, D tier cards are absolute garbage, unplayables, don't craft these, feel free to dust them. Great example of this, Auctioneer Jackson. For this leg of the review, I'm going to start with the 1 epic in the set, Maddest Bomber. It's a neutral card, 8 mana, 9/8. Battle Cry, deal 12 damage randomly split among all other characters. Clearly a throwback card and a meme, throwing back to Mad Bomb and Matter Bomber, I guess completing the cycle. If you disregard the meme, the card's not particularly strong or playable. 8 mana 9/8s that don't have a huge board impact or immediately win the game are pretty hard sells. And like if we're talking like 2015 Hearthstone, this would maybe be a reasonable card. In 2021 Hearthstone, you're making 9/8 worth of stats for 3 mana, 4 mana, that kind of thing. Cheating out this minion doesn't really do anything because all the text on it is Battle Cry. It doesn't have taunt, doesn't have rush, doesn't have any keywords. The Battle Cry in and of itself can easily backfire. It can destroy your board, it can destroy your opponent's board and kill your opponent and kill you. It's a nice meme, but it's not a serious card. You can feel free to dust it if you want, or if you're into shenanigans, by all means, build decks around it, who cares? So this card we're going to consider D tier. For the legendaries, I'm going to play them with their cinematics because they look cool. This one's Goliath, Sneed's masterpiece. Goliath is an 8 mana 8/8 with a Battle Cry. Fire 5 rockets at enemy minions that deal 2 damage each, and you pick the targets. That's actually kind of cool. I don't know if we've had like a multi-target effect in Hearthstone. I'm not quite sure how they would implement this, but it's kind of a long time coming. 5 separate targets? Yeah, I'm really interested to see how they implement this. If they implement this well, you can expect to see more multi-target cards in Hearthstone's future. This card opens up some design space if it works the way I think it does. It's really cool to see. Now, is it a playable card? Well, so 8 mana 8/8 is a pretty big guy. Like if you compare that to how much a threat like this actually costs in Wild, the body by itself isn't really worth it. This is kind of like a fat Reno the Relicologist. And we know Reno the Relicologist is playable. This is much bigger than Reno. It lets you pick the target, so if the 10 damage split 5 ways is not enough to kill everything, you can pick what dies, and that's pretty powerful. It's neutral, every class gets access to it, so maybe something like Shaman would be interested in this. Some fringe stuff that might be worth considering, like this is kind of an insane card to get off of Dr. Boom, for instance. But in terms of deck building, I don't really expect to see this one gain that much traction, but I mean, it's cool. I like the card conceptually. It's pretty nice. Okay, anyway, we're gonna call this one C tier. Okay, next up, Cookie the Cook. Cookie is a 3 mana 2/3 legendary Murloc. Lifesteal, Death Rattle, equip a 2/3 Stirring Rod with Lifesteal. I'm actually kind of disappointed in this one as far as like legendaries go. 2/3 Lifesteal minion for 3 mana is a little below rate. The Death Rattle to equip a Stirring Rod. This is the Stirring Rod, by the way. It's just a vanilla 3 mana 2/3 weapon with Lifesteal, so not bad, not good. So legendary minions are supposed to fit like a certain kind of card design niche in Hearthstone. Right? Like, you can only play one of them in a deck to offset the fact that they're often powerful effects, they're often interesting effects. I don't think this body in this set of text is really that interesting in terms of a legendary. I can imagine like kind of a regular version of this being an epic. Is there anywhere in Wild where I would play this? I don't think I'd play it in an ice fishing deck of any kind that wants like Flurgle Toxfin for obvious reasons. I'm not sure if old aggro Murloc Shaman is really interested in this card either. It's a relatively small stat line for the cost. cost. Murloc Shaman's basically all about sticking bodies on board and buffing them. This is a small but expensive body. The Death Rattle's not really that relevant for that. I don't know. I don't want to put it as a D tier because that feels pretty bad for a new legendary like this. And it's not like it's a terrible card, you know? Like, it's a sticky body, just not sticky in the traditional sense, right? Like, it's not a body that makes more bodies or a body that's hard to kill. It's a body that gets you additional value when it dies. I'm not really sold on this card, but I don't want to just discard it either. I'm kind of split. I'm gonna like kind of give it the benefit of the doubt and put it C tier, but I'll have to see it to believe it. Okay, next up, Mr. Smite. Oh boy. Mr. Smite's a 6 mana, 6/5 pirate. That's the text, your pirates have charge. Oh my. Okay, so this thing itself has charge. Just as a dumb standalone minion, it's a 6 mana, 6/5 charge, which is not something I really expected to ever see again in Hearthstone. If you just disregard the fact that it gives other pirates charge, it's Leroy with +1 mana, which is kind of nuts, right? Redundancy on your Leroys. I heard, yo dog, I heard you like a Leroy, so we put a Leroy in your Leroy. Okay, so let's talk about the obvious elephant in the room, Pirate Warrior. This card is probably really good in that deck. I don't know if it's an auto-include because of how expensive it is. At the end of the day, it's a 6 mana minion. But here's probably what's going to happen, right? You draw Mr. Smite going into like your Juggernaut turns. You play your card, you get your Juggernaut. Let's say your opponent deals through the board. You start with nothing except for the Juggernaut. You get your weapon, you get your free pirate, you get your cannon shots, and then you play Smite from your hand and you attack with Smite, you attack with the weapon, you attack with the pirate that you got out of the Juggernaut. This is a huge damage swing on those turns, right? It's 6 plus whatever Juggernaut generated plus your weapon. That's like half of your life total out of nowhere. That's obviously really strong. That's not even considering how silly this card is, pulling it out of the Juggernaut itself, right? The Juggernaut's going to generate this card some amount of the time, and when you do, you play the pirates from your hand that you've drawn because your deck has a lot of random value generators and card draw for reasons I still do not understand. And now you kill them again out of nowhere, you do 20 damage in one turn. This card in both of those positions makes it much harder to stabilize against Pirate Warrior. And it's really hard to stabilize against Pirate Warrior right now. If you are on the defense against Pirate Warrior, you can completely clear their board and still be dead the next turn from 15-20. It's an insane swing. It's borderline unacceptable. Well, clearly they wanted to push like pirates being cool, but come on. Really? This is the opposite of Cookie the Cook. I'm disappointed in Cookie because it's so weak, but I'm equally disappointed in Mr. Smite for being so over-the-top ridiculous. Anyway, we know where this one's going. Right next to Defias Cannoneer. Holy Alright, the final card of the set. Edwin, Defias Kingpin. This card is actually pretty cool looking. This is like a Goldilocks legendary for me. Like, Cookie is like too small and too underwhelming. Smite is too overpowered and over the top. Edwin's just right. 4 mana, 4/4 pirate, battle cry, draw a card. If you play it this turn, gain +2/+2 and repeat this effect. It's kind of like if Gadgets and Auctioneer and old Edwin kind of had a baby, and there are a few different ways I can see this card being reasonable. In worst case scenario, it's cheaper Azure Drake with upside. And you remember that Azure Drake was playable for a while. It's not playable now, but it was a very solid card for a long time. Let's say you have tons of mana, you play this card, you draw like Preparation. Okay, make a bigger Edwin, draw another card. You draw a spell that you can cast off the Preparation. Cool, play it. Bigger Edwin, draw another card. And you can keep going and going and going like that until you have a big Edwin that drew you cards. Now, traditional Edwin, you play all of your cards in one turn and then you make the Edwin. This card's a big threat that draws you cards, not a big threat that you have to sink all of your cards into. A little more expensive, but probably like much more powerful top end. Even the low end for this card is still pretty reasonable. Now, will this card see play in Wild? So rogue archetypes right now are basically things like Kingsbane, like Hyper Aggro, or things like Pillager Rogue or Garrote Rogue or something like that. The Pillager and Garrote decks are not going to want this. It doesn't really help the over-the-top combo sense. Kingsbane probably doesn't want this card either. It's not a weapon, it's not a weapon buff, it's not damage from hand. By the time you would play Edwin in that deck and start drawing cards with it, you're kind of already in the in-game scenario for Kingsbane Rogue, so you don't want it there either. Doesn't fit in Odd Rogue for obvious reasons. So does it fit in any other deck? There are kind of tempo style rogue decks like Galakron Rogue or something something that are really fringe, but not unplayable. You can still randomly scam wins in Wild, something like early Edwin or Foxy Fraud and Evil Miscreant to board flood shenanigans, Octobot, stuff like that, right? Like, there is something there. It doesn't already exist, like it's not an established archetype, but you can do it. I think this card would be perfectly reasonable in that deck. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I don't see this card really being like so over the top that I would consider it a balance problem or anything like that. It's a strong card, but in the context of Wild, a pretty fair card. Anyway, we're going to call this one a B tier. I hope it's better than that, but who knows. That's it for the Deadmines review. Looking at the distribution of cards, there are a few cards that are going to be pretty strong, pretty silly, that you're going to see tons of play in Wild. I definitely expect Defias Cannoneer and Mr. Smite to see tons of play. Defias Leper is going to be out there. Man the Cannons, if Defensive Warrior gains more traction, is definitely a playable. There are tons of reasonably strong or playable cards, like I rated new Edwin in that spot for Wild. Brilliant Macaw is a great example, Need for Greed. And then there are tons of fringe and not so great cards that still worth checking out, right? Like, keep in mind, I'm not a fortune teller, I'm not a miracle worker. I don't know what's going to be good or bad or not. I can only evaluate cards based on where they stand in the game as it is right now and my experience with games in general. It very well might be that Cookie the Cook is S tier, but I doubt it. Anyway, that's it for the ratings. Do you agree with these ratings? Do you disagree with these ratings? Is Keith an idiot? Let me know in the comments. And as always, like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thanks for watching.